Indiana Jones Decoded, the broadcast that we're going to dive deep into the mysteries, the myths, and the mayhem of the iconic film franchise in this debut episode of Mystery Conspiracy Theater. We're going to be cracking that whip on the legendary Raiders of the Ark movie that came out in 1980s. But tonight, we're going to explore the secrets behind this first installment that introduced to the world of this whip-cracking, border-dodging, archaeologist standpoint film. Welcome to the program, everybody. Stay tuned.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to FOJC Radio Sunday Night Live. We're so thankful for each and every one of you that is joining me and Brian for the broadcast tonight. Let us know where you're at in the chat. And we always love to hear from listeners all over the world. So thank you for joining us for the broadcast tonight. And we're starting a new series tonight, Mystery Conspiracy Theater, which is an obvious spin on the old Mystery Science Theater, which I know has had a lot of fans down through the years, and we're going to have a little Mystery Conspiracy Theater. And I want everyone to know that we are not recommending that people watch this movie. But what we are doing, we are going to decode this movie for the millions of people that have watched it. And we're going to help people understand the effect that this movie and other movies like it have had on our pulp culture. And also, we're going to be seeing predictive programming, how that films made by insiders are literally showing us what they're going to be doing in the future and giving some real insider signals on what they have done in the past. And we're going to see some amazing things tonight in this Indiana Jones Decoded. And Brian, thank you so much for joining us. This is right in our wheelhouse here. We love this stuff.
Absolutely, David. I'm always looking into decoding movies, like we did the Back to the Future film on our first one we decoded. But this is going to be a new series that we're introducing to the program here on FOJC Underground Church. And we're so glad for everybody to be here. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps with the algorithm. If you're new to the program, if you're just now tuning in and just now watching this broadcast, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps with everything here at the FOJC community here, what we're going to be doing here for the kingdom. And I pray everybody enjoys this broadcast. And I'm so glad to be here, a co-host with you, Brother David, for this new series here at Mystery Conspiracy Theater. First one out of the gate here with Indiana Jones Decoded. Brother David, let's ride this thing out tonight. What do you say, David?
Let's ride. And we're going to begin here with Indiana Jones Decoded. Now, in the beginning of the movie, Indy starts out in South America, and there's a time frame given. There's a date, 1936. And as I have found, and I'm sure a lot of you also have, that specific details in these type of movies means something. So 1936 in South America. And then we see Indiana Jones. He's there. He's heading toward a submarine later in the movie. And this submarine, in one of the shots, it's specifically identified as U-Boat 26. Now, when you look up the German U-boat number 26, it was commissioned in 1936. Now, what's the message here? We've got South America, 1936. We have German submarines, 1936. And this was the very time when the Germans were making expeditions into South America, making contacts to prepare their way for establishing a base in Antarctica. And there's a slide here that Brian has got on New Schwabenland. And in 1938, they officially announced their expedition to New Schwabenland. And in 1939, the Nazis placed their flag there on New Schwabenland. So we're definitely having indicators. Now, these are things that, I'll leave it up to the audience, as always, to decide. But are these things coincidences? Are these things just things that happen to be true? I don't believe they're coincidental. I believe they're sending a message, and we're going to see that this whole Antarctic German narrative looms large throughout this whole movie. Now, in this next slide, we're going to have a slide where, if you remember in the movie, there was when Indiana Jones, he's going into the cave and he's hunting the head of the idol. And when he comes out with the head of the idol, he sees this other fella that has spikes run through his head. And then he said, that's Forrestal. That's Forrestal. Well, this again is a huge indicator. They could have called this guy Joe, Mo, or Curly or anything, but they called him Forrestal. Now, this again is a huge message. Now, this next slide is a picture of the real Forrestal. This is Mr. James Forrestal. And Mr. Forrestal met his death in 1949. It's officially listed as a suicide, but it's absolutely was a murder. He was thrown out of one of the top windows of the tower of Besettia Naval Clinic. And to understand why that is so important to the narrative of this entire movie, let's get some background on just exactly who James Forrestal was. Now, I'll read a little bit here from Stephen Quayle's book, The Empire Beneath the Ice. And we're going to begin to see the deadly weave of the Satan's web. Now, it says here, and on page 175 of Mr. Quayle's book, as noted earlier, in 1947, President Harry Truman appointed him the first United States Secretary of Defense. Some contend that following Operation High Jump, Truman signed an executive order that created a special operation named Majestic 12, which was headed by Forrestal and charged with recovery and reverse engineering in alien UFO. Now, for all of you that are going to watch the Midnight Ride this Saturday night, you're going to see me and Brian talk about the alien PSYOP. And we're going to take it back to a book called The Day After Roswell, written by Philip Corso. Philip Corso was a member of Operation Paperclip. And we're going to connect him to the Jesuits, the Freemasons, and show that this whole alien scenario was a PSYOP. It was misinformation. And what they didn't want people to know is that they were not in Majestic 12. It was not about the back engineering of alien craft from millions of light years away, but it was about the back engineering of Nazi technology that was continuing to be developed at Antarctica. And this is one of the reasons why Mr. Forrestal had to die. He knew about the truth of the whole alien PSYOP. He helped create it. And we're going to show you later in Mr. Forrestal's life what made him turn on these globalists when he saw the pure evil of the intent and of the deception that they were perpetrating.
David, the James Forrestal and the Forrestal scene there with in the Indiana Jones movie. To me, it sounds like Mr. Steven Spielberg had some preconceived knowledge of something when he filmed this movie back in 1981. What do you say, David?
Absolutely. Now, in the movie, Indiana Jones is competing with the Nazis to get the Ark. Mr. Forrestal was the guy before Indy that tried to get it. Look what happened to him. There's Forrestal trying to take the secret of the Nazis. There he is with the spikes through his head. There's Forrestal. Well, the real Forrestal died also because he was privy to the secrets of the Nazis, to the whole alien psyop, and to what we could call the Nazi Internationale. And as we know, everyone knows that at the end of World War II, there were thousands of German scientists come into the United States under Operation Paperclip, some of the most elite, Werner von Braun, Walter Dornberger, and all the elite of the Nazis. And also, thousands went into the Soviet Union. And the entire exotic weapon programs of the Soviet Union and of the United States were headed up by German scientists that come through these operations, filtering these scientists together after the war. Now, it is not a stretch to imagine, and this is indeed what happened. Now, here we have guys like there at the Penume, at the rockets facility where von Braun and Dornberger worked, there at Penume, you've got one guy goes to America, one guy goes to Russia. Russia and America were supposedly enemies, but these guys were not. And we're naive to think that the collaboration between the German scientist in Russia and the German scientist in America, that there was not collaboration there. There certainly was. And we're also naive to think that the Germans, they absolutely established bases in South America where they continued their experiments with exotic weaponry. And this is really the shadow government. We talk about they, well, that's who they is. They, we could call it the Nazi Internationale, that is literally run by the elites in Antarctica and within the American and the Russian governments and their plants they have all over the world. That's who they is. That's the shadow government. These are the people that really pull the strings. And the whole alien psyop thing, that's just so you won't dare look there. Try to go to Antarctica. You won't get there. Just a couple of weeks ago, we did the Polar Pulse Sunday Night Live on Antarctica. But this isn't incidental, and it's not incidental that there's a real message sent. There's Forrestal. You buck us in a serious way. There's Forrestal, and that'll be you.
Well, it's interesting
if you mess with us.
It's interesting too, David. There's the biography. When you look up the biography, just with the Wikipedia from the film of the Forrestal character, they referred to him as Dr. Forrestal, which is an archaeologist, right? But here's where it gets interesting. It goes on and says that he taught in Princeton University, and like you said a minute ago, he's a rival to Indiana Jones. Well, here's one thing that on the biography here, it says that Forrestal spoke different languages, French, etc. But he supposedly the character spent intensive amount of time in Central and South America. As it says, Aztec, Mayan sites. I think it's interesting that they're, according to the biography here of the character in the film, they're honing in on these things. And also, it also says something about a pre-Viking relic, and I think that's just interesting that they're have. I guess there's other books and stuff out that I guess that are supposedly before this movie came out, or they maybe wrote more and they must have more information on the character. It must have come down more of an information stance on that. But I just thought that was interesting that the biography says that, and you don't really hear much about Forrestal, much in the next few films later on after this first one. So,
no.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. They hone in on the Aztec and the Mayan. I thought that was interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I doubt if very, very few people would have caught that. because now James Forstall, nobody knows who he was, but he was a hugely important figure. And the death that he met um, is it wasn't a suicide.
Did you say he
Uh,
died in 1949, David? Was it
I I,
1949?
be, I believe so. I believe so. You might want to check that. I believe so. It was 49, if my memory serves me right. And in 1947, I'll read just a little snippet here from Mr. Quayle. It says, for example, Forrestal was instrumental in creating the National Security Act of September 18th, 1947. He was instrumental in founding the NSA. Now, we don't want to miss the time sequence here. 1947, we have Roswell. 48, Israel becomes a nation. We have Admiral Byrd in the same time frame. Then we have the NSA. We have the missing Nazi submarines, the bases in Antarctica, and I believe that what crashed at Roswell, it took off right there from Antarctica. That is what I firmly believe. And this is what they don't want you to see. They're going to psyop you on the true shape of our Earth. They're going to psyop you on the whole alien. And we're going to unpack it really in a lot more detail to show Philip Corso, his involvement, and just how this whole psyop came down. And Forrestal knew too much. He was in there in ground zero on the founding of the NSA when all of these things were coming down. And Mr. Quayle concludes here, and I so agree with him. He says, on the other hand, if he understood that P Nazis had escaped to Antarctica, beat back American forces sent to capture them in Operation High Jump, which is Admiral Byrd and his expedition to Antarctica, for any of you that don't know, for our new listeners, and were in the process of running a shadow government, then it isn't too hard to imagine him being killed to silence him. There's
Wow.
Forrestal. And this is the message. There will be anyone that tries to come against these people in a serious way.
So get this, David. I just did a little quick research into the death of Forrestal. I want to make sure that the where his actual cause of death, right? So they say it's suicide, they say it's depression, all that good stuff, right? But here's where it comes down to. You're going to love this one, David. So we did the Back to the Future Decoded, the whole 88 miles per hour imagery. They go down the 88 mile narrative. I don't get into geometry. I don't get into it. I look at it just for research purposes. But David, everybody that's watching this program tonight, Mr. Forrestal jumped from a 16th floor. And there you go. You have your 8 plus 8. So there's 16. And there, I thought it was 20, but it's the 16th floor. He jumped and he fell to his death, David. So what do you say about that?
Yeah. These things, can believe, well, this is all just a coincidence. Well, no, it's not. It's not a coincidence. It's a message, and it's a message being sent from the elites. And when you look at the people that produce these movies, they're the elite of the elite. They really are. They're the insiders. This is not just predictive programming, but this is a threat. This is a prophecy of doom on anyone that would get too all about their little selves to stop these people. And why did they have to take James Forrestal out? And this just goes down the rabbit hole a little deeper. I want to read from a book entitled The Red Fog Over America. And this is by William Guy Carr. And on page 204, Mr. Carr unpacks the relationship between Mr. Forrestal and the financing of Adolf Hitler. Now, I'll read just a little bit. It says, in a new war, of course, Dillon Reed put up $25 million for the Weingart Stahlwerke of the Ruhr financing Thyssen and Hitler. James Forrestal was a partner of the firm at this time. $25 million went from the firm that Mr. Forrestal was a partner on directly to Adolf Hitler. They had it set up. And it's hard to even catch them. They're so good at moving their money around and laundering it. But there was a bank in the Netherlands where Fritz Thyssen, the major financer of Adolf Hitler, he controlled what was called the Union banking system. And this was made up of Bernard Baruch and also a Brown brother Harriman, which we're going to tell you about in just a minute, because this is going to bring some other very important people into the picture here. Going on, it says the evidence is that Forrestal was not pure or suddenly discovered the sinister web of international intrigue. He could not possibly have functioned without knowing Baruch's secret operations. What seems to have happened was his failure of nerve. He began to become, the reason for his depression is that he realized that he was involved firsthand with the financing of Adolf Hitler through the very firm that he was a member of. It says he became weak, depressed, and was taken to Florida by Brown Brothers Harriman's partner, Robert Lovett, who succeeded him as Secretary of Defense. Now, this is huge. Now, here we got Mr. Forrestal. He's a partner of the firm, sending millions to Adolf Hitler. So now he all of a sudden becomes depressed. The guy that drives him to get help is this fellow, Robert Lovett. Now, he was Secretary of Defense at the time. Robert Lovett becomes the new Secretary of Defense. Now, he is a board member. Robert Lovett, he replaces Forrestal as Secretary of Defense, and he's on Brown Brothers Harriman. Now, why does that ring a bell? Well, let me show you. I'm going to refer to a book that Donna and I wrote. Yes, that's right. And this is our book called The Great Seal of the United States. It's the first book that we ever wrote. And in this book, we expose the role of Brown Brothers Harriman in the financing of Adolf Hitler. And we also tied it directly to the secret society of Skull and Bones. Now, this was the job here of Skull and Bones. They had the people placed in the right places in the banking industry to be able to funnel and launder money straight to Adolf Hitler. Now, it's just an absolute fact. Now, I'll just read a little bit from our book here. It says that in another massive coincidence, we find out that the bank in Rotterdam that was used by Thyssen to obtain funds for Adolf Hitler, this controlled the Union Banking Corporation in New York, which was loaded with Skull and Bones men. Anthony Sutton's book, America's Secret Establishment, provides the documentation. The Harrimans had a financial interest in the order. The Union Banking Corporation of New York City was a joint Thyssen-Harriman operation. So it was literally a Brown Brothers Harriman and Fritz Thyssen, the major financer of Hitler. They were joined at the hip. And so were these other firms, like the one with Bernard Baruch. There was an intent here of the international bankers to finance and create Adolf Hitler. Now, what we don't want to miss is that on the board of Brown Brothers Harriman was Prescott Sheldon Bush. He was the father of George Bush Sr., the grandfather of George W. Bush. The Bushes deeply, even down to George. And this is a generational thing. Prescott, George Sr., George W., Skull and Bones to the bone. And even at the time, Skull and Bones man George Bush was running against Skull and Bones man John Kerry. Well, who do we vote for? Yeah, let's vote for the good guy. And that's just exactly where we're at now. And this is how secret societies operate. They place their key men in key positions, and they are literally able to manipulate and move millions of dollars. They can create revolutions. They can create leaders that they own lock, stock, and barrel. That's the way they operated then, and that's the way they still operate. But absolutely, the Bush family, for generations, They are directly linked to the financing of Adolf Hitler. It's a fact. And Mr. Forrestal got a little sick to the gut with it. You know, when you realize that these men, and you know, it's still going on right now. Poor boys are sent to fight the rich man's war. The poor boys are sent to bleed and die for the greed and the control games that the multi-international bankers try to cook up. And that's the way it was then, and that's the way it is now. So there's an unmistakable message here about where's Forrestal, and we're not missing it. Yes.
I was muted. It's kind of interesting that the whole Forrestal thing is tied to the UFO phenomenon, right? And his whole connection with all that. So, and it kind of the correlation with modern time as far as fast forward to 2024, the whole Trump involvement. You know, I keep hearing that Trump is scared to talk about it. He's been briefed on certain things when it comes to the UFO phenomenon, the UAP. And there's like the gentleman that keeps coming out. There's a journalist that keeps coming out and saying that there's information that he's not supposed to disclose because he's scared for his life. Well, it seems like to me with this Forrestal thing, it seems like there's a connection that goes way back. And then, you know, if you get into the Nikola Tesla died, 1943, 6 years before this event in Forrestal. So there's a connection here with this whole CIA, and if you collaborate the data, it seems like they're on a power trip. And then you have the Bushes, like you just spoke of. It seems like Nikola Tesla had a big part in the UFO and all these other things. What do you say, David? There's a tie there, and there's connections that, to me, are very compelling. What do you say, David?
I say absolutely. And I say I love every chance to get to say it, that Einstein's physics is physics for stupid people. And that's what they're going to teach people in school. And when they find someone they think's bright enough to be a help to them, they'll tell them what's really going on. And the principles by which these super exotic weapons were created. I mean, the Germans were working on stuff that was mind blowing. You know, we've done midnight rides on the Bell and some of the amazing technology that they had. And they were just literally, these weapons were so powerful that if with just a few more months here in the window, no one could have stopped the Germans. And that's the thing now, that they could have weapons that are so advanced, like a lot of this stuff you see. Oh, it's the aliens. Well, no, it's Eric and Siegfried. That's who it is. And this whole thing that with these sophisticated weapons, that this international, they really can control the balance of power in the world and literally run things and call the shots through people they have placed in significant places in banking and in politics. They're able to get the job done, and that's exactly what we're looking at here.
Another thing too to point out, David, you know, the Philadelphia experiment. I think with all the Navy applications, I really do truly think that they was testing these destroyer ships. And I could go on a big rant about that, but that's for another program, another broadcast down the road. But these destroyer ships had technology about them. And we know in 1944, 1945 with the Philadelphia experiment, and that directly ties back to Tesla too. So they was either mapping out and testing the information, you know, somehow communicating back and forth. This whole thing ties back to the Germans, the Antarctica Treaty. Something stinks, David, and I think it all is compiled together. And I think Admiral Byrd account and these other people that have came out later on that you can go back and look at the documents, it's pretty profound that here we are in the UFO narrative, and this Forrester gentleman, he got the bad end of the deal, didn't he, Brother David?
Yeah, I did. And all of these things are related. All of these right in the same time frame. We've got Operation High Jump, the creation of the NSA. We got Roswell. We got poor Mr. Forrestal starts the NSA, then he jumps, out of the top story window at Bethesda Naval Medical Hospital. Now, let's just say a word about that. There have been a list of people that have went in Bethesda Naval Medical Hospital not to ever come out. Another famous one was McCarthy, who was the fighter against communism in the early 50s. He went in, never come out. And by the way, remember where the autopsy was performed on John F. Kennedy? You got it, at the Bethesda Naval Medical Hospital. Now, we did a midnight ride some time back. I don't even know if it's still on the channel, but it was called, I can't remember. I think we might have called it the Hoosier Illuminati. But in this, we were talking about no, it was called the Mystic Knights of Corvus, I believe. But anyway, there was a lady that was the daughter of the head of the Mystic Knights of Corvus. And they are the head of putting on the Mardi Gras down in New Orleans. And according to this lady, that her father had left a box under his bed that she inherited after his death. And in this box, he told quite the story, how that there was a secret society started at the big medical center down there in Louisiana, and that it was started at the same time that the Skull and Bones were started. That the fella, William Russell, and him, this other fella, were best friends, and that while William Russell started the Skull and Bones, this other fellow started a Skull and Bones that only doctors were a part of. And has anyone seen anyone in the medical industry that lies faster than a dog could trot? We've seen a few of those, haven't we? And we see a secret society. There's many, many wonderful people in the medical industry that they are there with all of their heart to do good. But according to this lady, there was a secret society that carried out assassinations through medical doctors. And, I believe, that's my opinion, but I believe Mr. Forrestal, Mr. McCarthy, and others that have been taken out, just what we could call medical assassinations.
Well, it's interesting, David, too, when we think about this and in the collaboration of the JFK narrative and whatnot. There's so many movies and MK Ultra, all those different programs and applications that came out. So I have a question for you. So we're talking about Skull and Bones, all these secret societies. What if, David, this is just me, my speculation here. What if all the Space Force, because there's all these Space Force logos, they say they have these different platoons or however you say it, they different sections or sanctions to different logos, when it comes to Space Force. I've seen multitude of them. It's really strange. What if it's just a different logo, different tie to back to the ancient day, like the older days of the Skull and Bones, the secret societies? What if it's the same thing? Because, according to Lockheed Martin and all these gentlemen coming out, these whistleblowers say that we have secret space programs that are, been around for 70 plus years or longer. Their claims, they're saying, well, we should have been living in a, dystopia, like high-tech advancements back in the 1820s. So is it some kind of big, huge cover-up for technological gain? I say so, because, lo and behold, we're talking about Antarctica. Isn't it kind of interesting that they have islands and different things that I can't speak about because it relates to the last 3 years? But isn't it kind of interesting they have these certain names for these islands that correlate to certain types of people and power grab, but they have an Antarctica tree down there where everybody migrates and has cupcakes and lollipops, and coffee and sunshine, and they're not allowed to seek war or anything like that, and they have this so-called common ground, so to speak. But there's a little fun in plug-in humor. But what I'm getting at is, what if the Space Force, all these secret societies, and they've just picked up make it more relevant, make it more enticing for the new generations, to come in and say, hey, check this out. We got all this esoteric knowledge. Check this out. What do you think, David?
Well, it goes all the way back to the Knights Templar. And when Knights Templar were created, they say, well, they're for the purpose of protecting pilgrims on the way to the Holy Land. Well, they were anything but that. That's the cover story. And when you look at groups like Space Force, NASA, and so many of these groups, what they say they're all about is not even what they're even all about. There's a secret agenda. Each and every one of these little groups, NSA, DARPA, the whole shooting match, they're all an intricate part of a plan that's heading toward globalism and the outright destruction of human genome as being genetically pure. And all of these, and that's what they do. With key people within each of these organizations, they're able to control this through secret societies. And that's the way they roll. That's how they roll.
Well, switching gears, David, you want to talk about the one of the iconic scenes in the film of Indiana Jones here, Raiders of the Lost Ark. What do you think, David? We think we should.
Yeah, absolutely. Take our viewers through those slides and uh, set up these concepts. And yeah, just go through those, Brian. Absolutely.
So what we have here is a couple scenes. It's frame by frame. We're going to go and talk about this. It's pretty iconic, like I said a minute ago. But we're going to be deciphering this location that Mr. Indiana Jones is trying to find the location of the Ark of the Covenant. So with him doing this, he has to have a staff. So he goes in, finds this. It's just a model of like Egyptology. So they go in and he's trying to map this room out of Tanis. Okay, he's trying to find the room of Tanis. So he finds it, and there's a chamber filled with these ancient hieroglyphics and all these artifacts, etc. But he's holding there in his hand, as you can see here. He's holding a staff. Well, the staff of Ra, and it's a golden rod topped with like a crystal. I want to point out the crystal because, and then one of the newer ones, the crystal skulls, there's always this crystal concept here when it comes to the Indiana Jones programs here, the franchise. He's really trying to figure out the exact location of the Ark of the Covenant. And in the background, you can see these intricate carvings on the walls. And there's a picture on the screen there of the raw imagery in the sun. Well, there's these gods and depicting the Egyptian gods in the background here. I'll show more. They're actually having a battle. I thought that was kind of interesting. The room's real quiet. The scene's really quiet. You can only hear like Indiana Jones and his footsteps during this scene. So I want to point this out, Brother David. I've seen this when it comes to ancient megalithic sites just in the wild, talking about Indian mounds, etc. They use light. Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, freeze it right there. Let's look at this. Is that a bird on that staff?
That is a bird on that staff, Brother David. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, let's just speak to that little bird on the staff just for a moment. This ties in with something that we've been talking about in the Midnight Ride about the belief that these avatars that were the false messiahs, Lugalbande, Narma-Sin, Gilgamesh, and a host of others, they were all believed to be the incarnation of an Anzu or the Thunderbird, or as it would be called in Egypt, the Bennu bird. And all of these ancient avatars and these false messiahs were believed to be the incarnation. So that's why we got the little bird up on there. That ain't Woody Woodpecker.
No, it's not Woody Woodpecker, David. And well,
excuse me, Brian. Go ahead. That was just so right there in your face. I just want to say something about that. But no, excuse me. You go right ahead.
I'm glad that. Look, go ahead and interrupt all you want, David. It's no problem at all. I appreciate it. It adds to it because this has got my gears turning here. Before we move on, you remember when we did our Gobekli Tepe? You remember at the Cygnus bird is there. The same imagery, with those pillars.
Yes, sir.
Same imagery, and
yes, sir.
But yeah, that's a whole. But go check out Gobekli Tepe. We did a Gobekli Tepe, Cities Lost in Time. Go check it out. Links in the description. I'm pretty sure I put it in the description, so check that out. It's got a lot of information there on Gobekli Tepe. So,
yeah, and I just want to say that night we got off about over a half hour late because of just technical drama, and a lot of people didn't get to see it, but I was very pleased with that Gobekli Tepe, Cities Lost in Time. If you missed it, go watch it. I don't think you'll be disappointed.
I agree
Go ahead,
100%.
right ahead, Brian.
I agree 100%, David. So yeah, the Thunderbird, I agree, David, and this staff here. So this staff has, let's just say, mythical, magical abilities with the rays of the sun coming. So what we go on here, and it starts to the sun starts to slowly move into the access point of the hole there, and the sun starts to rise, and the beam of light shines through the crystal. So it's casting this bright light, and it's going over top of the Egyptian city. So when we go in and we start to really, Andy's getting like, he's like, I'm correct, I was right. He's puzzled, right? He's starting to get really all of his research is coming together. It's like real, all the gears are turning. So he's casting this bright light of this golden ray on the floor, and Andy watches in awe because he's like, he knows it's going to reveal something, a hidden map or some kind of location. He knows it. He's put all the effort into it, and it starts to move. And what he's finding is it's trying to find the location of the Well of the Souls, so the resting place of the Ark, according to this film. And as he goes on, and it keeps getting, going over and over all the obelisks. You got to watch out. There's the obelisk in there. And this ray of light, you can see in that slide there, the camera zooms out and you can see the medallion. It's this intricate design etched into it. So the design looks like we was talking about earlier about the staff of Ra. But this ancient mechanism, it's sitting there going over top of this map of this location, is showing this the right place. Well, I want to point this out here on FOJC here. Check this out. As soon as it gets to a certain point, it shows a cross, and I wanted to point that out and get your opinion on it, David. It's for a blink millisecond. I had to really go back and make sure that it was a frame, really super quick, because once it goes in, it goes into this, and it's like an explosion with the sun rays of Ra here. But I really want to know your comments on this cross here, David, because this is giving Mr. Indiana Jones here, the information that he needs to find the Ark of the Covenant. And I thought that this was it's blaspheming, and I want to know what you think about this, David.
Yeah, and if you think anything in a Spielberg film gets in there by accident, nothing's there by accident. And this is so quick. I don't think that hardly anyone would catch this if you don't slow the film down. It's like a subliminal message. And of course, this is a mockery of the cross of Christ with the old concept that, those guys that were believed they were the incarnation of the Anzu bird, the Thunderbird, they're the real saviors. And it's promoting the false Messiah concept that John spoke so well to on the Midnight Ride here just recently, but that's exactly what it is. And also, what do we see? We go in here and we see the great big obelisk. Well, in our Cities Lost in Time on Karnak, we showed there, and Brian had the actual Google Earth footage where they had the big pyramid and they have the lake of water. Well, what do we got in Washington, D.C.? And it's right here in the movie. Later on in the movie, toward the close, there they are in Washington, D.C. We see the Washington Monument and the reflecting pool right in front of it. The message is that now the seat of the false savior is right there in Washington, D.C. And there's absolutely no missing this. It's right there in front of her face. Nothing accidental about it.
Well, one thing too, David, I want to point out, you mentioned the Knights of the Templar a while ago too. It could be also not only blaspheming toward Christ, but it also could be revealing the Knights of the Templar imagery too. That's just my take on it, maybe. And it's
yes,
showing,
sir, absolutely.
And it's showing the implosion. It implodes, explodes, right? And then you're enlightened. See, it gives you the enlightenment aspect, and that, to me, it was just it's very occultic for sure. And there's the outside and behind camera shot of Mr. Indiana Jones there. And what's so interesting, David, it shows light through the village. It shoots lights from all corners when it hits that one certain point where the crossing, right? It's kind of gets you all. It kind of makes you think of the eclipse when he was talking about the Nineveh, Cities Lost in Time. That crossing shows, and so it's in this chamber. And you have all these gods fighting, these depictions of gods, but there's like this, this is the way I see it. they all come together when they're enlightened, and they get the light
Yeah.
from Ra. And whoever carries and wields the staff
Mm-hmm.
gets enlightenment, gets information, and then has the knowledge to access the Ark of the Covenant, according to
Yes.
this film. And who wields the sword, who wields the staff, right? And it gets into, there's a lot of cult meetings with that, but we can go down a big rabbit hole. But that's the way I take it. We have the hidden chamber, we have this hidden chamber, and we have this enlightenment if you go through supposedly this Ra bird like staff. So what do you think, David?
Now, well, one more thing here we want to connect here. The staff of Ra, the sun god, is showing them where the well of the souls is. We have the false Messiah, and we're going to be showing you when we get to that point that it's a false Ark of the Covenant. It's not the real Ark of the Covenant. And when they're at the end of the movie, we all remember that end of the movie when all the spirits are coming out of the ark. Well, this is the release. Well, we find the well of the souls. We shine the staff of Ra. We've got the cross of the false savior. And these souls from the well of souls are released. That's what we're seeing, the release from this false ark of all these spirits that we see here. They're at that end of this movie that we all, if you ever seen the movie, you don't miss that. But we've got a consistent narrative being woven here of the false Messiah and of the secret Nazi Internationale.
Well, I want to point something out too before we move on, David. The staff, when you zoom in, it almost looks like there's a red or the top of the head of the phoenix, if you want to call it that, but the bird. It actually looks like it has a red medallion in it, like a red stone. We could go down a dark path with that. There's a lot of, we could only speculate, but I wonder if there's blood imagery there. The blood of, there's like this blaspheming, it's just, indicating the blood of Christ, that kind of nonsense. And that's where my mind goes when we do decoding these programs, but it's like a slap in the face to our Messiah, Jesus Christ. So.
And each and every one of these mystery religions, they used human sacrifice, each and every one of them. And absolutely, that blood there of the human sacrificial victim, it's the mockery and the satanic counterfeit of the precious blood of Jesus Christ.
Well, one thing too, we're decoding it here, and when the sun goes through, and I agree with you 100% about Jesus Christ here, but it almost reminds me, David, of the cutout in where the access point. It almost looks, if you can see on the screen there, it looks similar to Cobra, like the G.I. Joe narrative. I hate to go down the rabbit hole, but it almost looks like it has two little, it's got like the eyes. If you see it, it's kind of broken up. It's not a perfect circle, right? It's not perfect, obviously, because they tore down into it, but it's almost, and it makes me think of a snake imagery a little bit.
Yeah.
The cobra, whole cobra kind of feel to it, and then you have the Ra and the snake. You have the Kundalini. You have this light, receiving the light, and then you use these staff to find this map, so to speak. And it's really dark and occultic, like Brother David disclosed at the beginning of the program. We're not promoting this movie. We are just trying to peel back the onion and show that the evidence we find on the occultic stance and stay away from it in a sense. Mm-hmm.
Now, you picked up on something very astutely there visually, that the imagery of the bird and the serpent runs together. And this comes to full fruition with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. And also, this is the basilisk, which was part bird and part snake. So absolutely, this is just exactly a lot of what this symbolism portrays. And it's intentional. It's absolutely intentional.
Well, and one thing too, he had to fall into it, David. Think about it. Indiana Jones had to fall into it. Fallen state, right? It gets in, there's a lot of, and it took a human to wield it, to be able to find the information. And he has to have, and if you remember when at the beginning of the film, and there's these I think the scientist or archaeologist that's talking to him about the Germans, and he's referring to like the Ark of the Covenant, and goes and even makes biblical references. And then and Indiana Jones said, I don't believe any of that magical. He's just saying it's all a bunch of folklore, nonsensical, mythology stuff. He's like, I don't believe any of it. But then he goes, what I mean? So the portraying of this character, he's strong-willed and he gets it done, right? He gets it done. He's a let's just say he's a light bearer. Like he's bearing the light, and it's almost like there's this thing about he's coming to a fallen state, and he becomes like a Gilberine to wield this sword of Ra. There's a human factor, then there's a fallen angel and a fallen man concept here too. Also, with plus the Kundalini, the whole serpentine thing, and the feathered serpent. Yeah, David, this is deep here. Yes, sir.
And do you remember the scene there where Indy is riding the white horse?
Mm-hmm.
Could we even have some definitive false messiah symbolism sprinkled through this whole thing, like Brian was picking up on that? Well, there's the white horse. And of course, in the Muslim faith, the Mahdi rides the white horse, and many Christian scholars will interpret the white horse in Revelation as being that of the beast. So and I definitely think there's some of this false messiah imagery that's sprinkled throughout this whole movie.
Agreed, David.
All right. Are we ready for Mr. Steindorf here?
Yes, sir.
All right. I want to read something here from the Religion of the Ancient Egyptians to help us get an understanding of what the Egyptians meant by this well of the soul. It says here on page 126, beneath the flat earth, oh my goodness, beneath the flat earth lies a second earth named Tawet, a land which, like Egypt, is traversed by a river. On both banks are long passages and deep caverns. These are the dwelling places of the dead. By day, this is a region of dreariness, desolation, and mourning, but by night, when the sun has descended in the west behind the mythical mountain Manu, the light shines upon the dead who behold the splendor of Ra. All right, so the actual belief is that the dead, and we're talking about the Rephaim, we're talking about literally the release of the spirits. Now, we know from Scripture that the restrainer will be removed, Revelation chapter 9, that there will be spirits from the underworld released. We've read in the book of Jubilees, which I believe to be accurate, that 90% of them have been confined to the underworld. So there's going to be a big release. So here's Indiana Jones. He's got the staff of Ra, finds the well of souls. The end of the movie, they're coming out of the ark. This is prophetic of release of the fallen spirits from the underworld, from the well of souls. And this is exactly what we have portrayed here. All right. Now, let's go on. Are we ready for 2 Chronicles here, Brian? All right. Now, okay, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
The next slide here, we have a Hollow Earth imagery, David, and this one kind of hits home for me, especially around here in the local area. But then we have this Hollow Earth concept. A lot of people frown upon this, but this slide here with all the Argotha imagery, it talks about the advanced races, and I'll zoom in there for everybody. It has everything on here. It talks about the cave city, the semi-advanced. It even talks about Shambhala. It gets into the Tibet and all these different things. And I wonder, David, what we talked about here during this program, if there's any connection here, what we could correlate with the Hollow Earth theory in this. But as you see on the top left, it even refers to Admiral Byrd's Flight 1947, and it actually even talks about literally saucers and all kinds of man-made tunnel systems, etc. But I've even seen other maps similar to this one that talks about the elephant gods and different types of, Shiva and different things that go along with that. What do you say, David? I mean, I think this one has Mammoth Cave. Yes, it has Mammoth Cave in Kentucky in my local area. and it's kind of interesting how it has. I think one of the bigger ones that have more information on it. It actually tells the mileage, or like how many miles you have to go to carve out through the tunnels to get to this so-called land of the advanced races. What do you think, David? There's a lot of to unpack here.
Well, as a matter of fact, I've got a lot of books here in our FOJC library, and I actually have a book written by a man that claimed to have found the entrance to the hollow earth and to have went in near Paducah, Kentucky in the 1800s. Just throwing that out there. And the cave system in Mammoth Cave, they admit to over 500 miles of cave there that's not explored. And I think there's even much, much more than that. But all of the things that we've talked about, Admiral Byrd, and I believe he absolutely just flew through a portal and saw the things there in the heart of the earth. We've talked about the lineage of Cain, that they were banished from the face of the earth, and that they'd be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. Well, that might really mean just what it says. And we've talked many times how we believe that there were Nephilim that escaped the destruction by going into the heart of the earth. And I believe they're there, and they've been reproducing and are still there. We've seen evidence of this from we saw the face peelers in Peru, where there have been several actual bodies of little guys that they've found in these caves in Peru. And we're having modern day instances of people being attacked, murdered, and their face peeled off. So all of these things, and here the whole concept that is put forth in this movie, which is substantiated by the very belief of the Egyptian religion itself, all points to this concept that there's something in the hollow earth. And the Egyptians believed, and this ties into a lot of the things we've talked about in the Book of Enoch commentary with John and I on Now You See TV, how that there were the 12 gates, and in some of these gates, when the sun, aka Ra, went through certain gates and portals, it actually illuminated the heart of the earth. So this is the belief of these ancient peoples. And I believe, just like the Egyptians there, they said the flat earth, the Egyptians were flat earthers. They understood the way things really were. And, a few people today do also. So I think all of this whole hollow earth understanding, that this is a key concept to understanding everything we got going on here.
Would you say, David, this is Stargates?
Yeah.
Future program, folks. Future program
Yeah.
in the works. Just throwing it out there. Little plug in.
Yeah, we've got gates and portals, and absolutely we do. Yes, sir.
Well, I want to, real quick before we move on, I want to kind of direct our attention at the very bottom where it says Rainbow City. Supposedly there's an opening there at the south of this Argotha map. Rainbow City, there's a lot of things that, you hear the Rainbow Trail. You hear these concepts tied back to Philadelphia experiment, but then they changed the name. And it's interesting that I'm pretty sure it's called Rainbow Trail. And it kind of reminds me of when we talked about the misread record on our when we did talking about the Wizard of Oz program.
Yes,
and
sir.
the Vapor Trail. Well, I'm wondering, David, because a rainbow bridge, talking about Niagara Falls, there's all this correlation with Rainbow City on the Argotha, Rainbow Bridge. You got Thor, all these different movies, and Marvel. They know this. Steven Spielberg on Indiana Jones, and I done forgot the gentleman that made the Thor movie in the Marvel comics. I know Stan Lee is the comic book original author to all that, supposedly, but there's these heaven, you got the different advanced races, you have these concepts. We have the giants, this is what, the Argoth is talking about, the land of the advanced races. There's this gate, this Rainbow City, Rainbow Bridge. What do you think, David? There's a lot to unpack here, a lot to peel back. And it corresponds, Indiana Jones here with these ties to everything. And it gets, this is the only first film of the franchise. And I think they have 5 now. David, I think it's 5 movies now, so we have a lot to unpack. But I'll give you the floor back, Brother David.
Well, and we've showed pictures also before of the Rainbow Mountains in South America. And I mean, it's crazy when you see this. It's like I wonder how I've gone all my life and no one's ever pointed this out before. There's literally mountains that are set different colors, one right after the other, down there in South America. And in Australia, the rainbow takes on a distinctive serpent mythology. And this rainbow serpent is a huge strain and narrative in the mythology down among the native people in Australia. And absolutely, we know what the rainbow has become today. This is something that the great symbol that God used to be the guarantee that the earth wouldn't be destroyed again by a flood with Noah, the covenant there with Noah, that this has indeed been perverted, as we all very well know.
Absolutely. And real quick, I know I'm taking up time here, but the direct our attention and where it has the sediments and granite and basalt, and it talks about the different minerals. And if you remember, I think it was on Polar Pulse program we did when I talked about the granite, talked about the patent of the teleportation. You know, when it comes to human teleportation, they're talking about the granite obelisk. And I think maybe we talked about this also on the Gobekli Tepe Cities Lost in Time. And we talked about the granite, and it had to be a granite obelisk to have full human teleportation. And I think it's interesting in this map here, this graph, it shows granite. I mean, I just think it's something to really to ponder on. Is there something going on here, David? I mean, you got you got these obelisks everywhere all over the earth. Is there something to do with ancient stargates, portals? What do we got going on here? We got the Majestic 12. We got the CIA operatives. We got NASA being coming up out of the whole JFK narrative with the JFK files. We have all the Oswald, the twins. What do you think, David? Is there something nefarious going on, like with the whole, just collaborating it all together before we move on? Does NASA and these gentlemen, did they know ancient Egyptian, esoteric? I think 100% yes, ancient fallen angel knowledge. What do you think, David? And we'll move on.
Well, sure they did. And the very place where the Well of Souls was discovered, we have the big obelisk there uh, in the movie. And later, it shows us the Washington Monument, the big obelisk. Now, the obelisks were made of granite and they had quartz crystals in them. And these quartz crystals are the same thing that are the components in computers. And literally, and the same is true with the crystal skulls, that they were absolutely capable of storing information like a computer. They were absolutely capable of being used for a communication device, an energy device, or even a weapon. Uh, Maybe if we'd go back in time, we'd see all the Egyptians had blue roofs. I don't know. But this is definitely a capability, definitely a possibility.
I'm working on that DeLorean, David, to go 88 miles an hour. I'm working on it. If anybody has a barn find DeLorean set back that's rusting away, me and David's interested on if you can make us a flux capacitor. There's a little fun humor. I'll give the floor back to you, David.
All righty. Well, let's talk just a little bit about the real ark in the Bible, and let's look at Second Chronicles 35:3. And it says, and said to the Levites that taught all Israel, which were holy unto the Lord, put the holy ark in the house which Solomon the son of David, king of Israel, did build. It shall not be a burden upon your shoulders. Serve now the Lord your God and his people Israel. Now we know the ark started out in the temple, but now put it into the temple. And there were times of such grave apostasy during the reigns of Manasseh, when there was such wickedness that there were holy Levites that feared for the safety of the ark and of the scrolls of scripture within the ark, that literally they took the ark and hid it. Now there's ideas. There's one belief that it was in Ethiopia. They still claim to have it there in the bottom of a church, and I don't believe that. if the Israelis thought there for a moment that the ark was really there, I bet they'd go get it. What do you bet? So I don't believe that one. There's also the belief that the ark could be hidden, that they, in a time of apostasy and at the time of the Babylonian invasion, that the ark was hidden in an underground compartment there in Jerusalem, in an underground place. And I'll read a scripture in Second Maccabees, and this is the King James Apocrypha, and this is the account which I would be more inclined to give credence to. In Second Maccabees chapter 2, beginning in verse 4, it was also contained in the same writing that the prophet, being warned of God, commanded the tabernacle and the ark to go with him. As he went forth into the mountain where Moses climbed up, that would be Mount Nebo, and saw the heritage of God. And when Jeremy came thither, he found an hollow cave wherein he laid the tabernacle and the ark and the altar of incense, and so stopped the door. And some of those that followed him came to mark the way, but they could not find it. Which when Jeremy perceived, he blamed them, saying, As for that place, it shall be unknown until the time that God gather his people again together and receive them unto mercy. Now, according to this, Jeremiah hid the ark in Mount Nebo at the time when the Babylonians came in 586 BC. And one thing that we can in Scripture in Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 16, there's a prophecy. And it shall come to pass when ye be multiplied and increased in the land in those days, saith the Lord, they shall say no more, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they remember it, neither shall they visit it, neither shall that be done anymore. And now the Lord Jesus Christ he is the lamb that was slain from the foundation of the world. And the Ark of the Covenant, whether it's found or whether it's not found, if someone would come up with the Ark of the Covenant, I mean, this would just absolutely drive people nuts. I mean, whoever could have possession of the real Ark of the Covenant, and I wouldn't doubt that some kind of shenanigans like this might be pulled. Right now, underneath Bernini's canopy in Rome, where the Pope sits, there it's literally, if you look at it, it's an imitation of the Holy of Holies where the Ark of the Covenant sat. So to us, the Lord Jesus Christ is the one we worship. That Levitical system and the things of the tabernacle, they no longer hold special relevance for us. Of course, it's special. Of course, it's something wonderful, but it doesn't have that super spiritual meaning for us because Jesus Christ has risen from the dead, and he is our great high priest of the order of Melchizedek. That is what we're all about, not finding some relics of the bones of some saint or even the candlestick of the temple or whatever. If that we would find that, that'd be neat and that'd be cool. But I do believe that it's possible that this lost ark could come back in the last days as some kind of evil plan by the evil ones.
David, here's my opinion on this. I think they have it. They know where it's at. It's just gaslighting everybody and saying we moved it here, moved it there. If they're admitting that they have crash retrieval programs at the UFOs, they have the Ark of the Covenant, let's just say in a hunkered down bunker somewhere. Because here's where I'm at with this. With the radiation signatures and EMF readings, David, they have to have it. They have to know where it's at. They got it lock and key. What do you think, David?
I wouldn't argue with it. I wouldn't argue with you. And, I think this very well could be a part of the scenario. I wouldn't argue with you a bit there, Brian. All right. Well, let's talk just a little bit about the false ark. And if the ark, yeah, morals and dogma. Yeah. We're going to look here at Albert Pike. Albert Pike, who was, as most of you know, the leading Masonic scholar of all time. His book, Morals and Dogma, is called by many the Masonic Bible. And here in this movie, we have the concept, well, we got the well of the souls of the underworld, of the dead, that is visited by the god Ra. We have the false cross upon the tomb there of the false Messiah. We have here in the end these spirits that are released from the well of the souls. They're pouring out of this ark in the end of the movie. Now, not the real Messiah, not the real Ark of the Covenant. And what we need to know is that the mystery religions, and specifically here, we're going to look at the role of the ark, the false ark, in the Egyptian mystery religions. And we'll learn this from Mr. Albert Pike. On page 412 of Morals and Dogma, he writes this, and he talks about the procession in the rites of Isis, the worship of the Egyptian goddess. He said the same officers are found in the procession of initiates of Isis, described by Apelles, all clad in robes of white linen drawn tight across the breast, and close fitting down to the very feet. Came first one bearing a lamp in the shape of a boat, and you can see they're imitating the candlestick. They're imitating it all. Second, one carrying an altar. We have the imitation of the candlestick, the brazen altar. And third, one carrying a golden palm tree and the caduceus. Then followed a chest or ark, magnificently ornamented, containing an image of the organs of regeneration of Osiris, or perhaps of both sexes, emblems of the original generating and producing powers. In the Egyptian mysteries, there was this false ark that was a blasphemous, and this whole procession of the worship of Isis was blasphemy against the actual worship that the Lord ordained for his people, Israel. So here we see the false ark, the role it played, and it gets back, and of course, Albert, and in Morals and Dogma, he teaches that God is bisexual, just like Blavatsky, and he takes it right out of the Kabbalah. And here we see the chest with the organs of the sexes. I mean, this is rank paganism, and it's disgusting. But we can see here that the image, everything is turned inside out, and the dead being released from the well of the souls. These are not anything from the good side, but this is speaking of the end time release of the spirits from the restrainer, and the whole concept here of the false ark in imitation of the worship of the true God.
I agree 100%, David. And it's just blasphemous, and they've subliminally put it in our face through movies, media,
they do.
Magazines, books, whatever. And the devil's used the tools to manipulate the minds, and especially I think here in America. I think we've been bamboozled enough to, make our eyeballs peel back in your head as far as I'm concerned, because it just, it seems like, when you relate back to these films, it's like, whoa, and you got a new pair of eyes, literally, a new pair of, you can see things, the veils coming off your eyes, so you can actually relate back to something you've watched like 500 times probably, because everybody's guilty of watching these movies over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, I bet almost and like I say, we're not encouraging people to go watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I bet that almost everyone in our chat room tonight, I bet you've all seen this movie. This is something that we grew up with, that was a part of our culture. And that's why we're doing this, to help us understand the influence that these movies have on our culture, and have all had on us. It's inescapable. This is what we were raised with. And I know back in the day, I didn't think much of it. I even watched The Little Rascals, and I didn't even, we did a midnight ride about The Little Rascals. There's all kinds of stuff in that. I never got it. But yet these things, They subliminally program you. They plant things in your mind that are expanded upon later. You see, and these things shape our understanding, and they shape our worldview. And beyond that, there's this element of predictive programming that is, I think, we need to be aware of, because when you look at these things, this 1936 stuff and the Forrestal stuff, this is a coincidence. We are of all people most naive if we just want to say, well, this is just a coincidence. No, it's not. It's all deeply tied to this entire scenario of the shadow government that is based out of Antarctica.
I agree, David. In this next slide, talking about the Ark of the Covenant, you got Indiana Jones and the gentleman, I don't forget the character's name. They're holding the Ark, supposedly, and, I could sit here and kind of comment on this. It's kind of interesting that you have obviously the two angels at the top of the Ark there, but then you have the two men are trying to work together so they will not drop it, so to speak. And I just thought it was interesting. You have the way that they have it, this shot here in the scene of the movie. They're looking at each other. They have to literally work together to balance it out on these two supposedly, I guess, rods, to keep them from not getting, according to the beginning of the film, the Ark of the Covenant, shot out plasma rifles, basically. Like, it was like, full of, we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, about the ghosts that come out of it and whatnot. But it's interesting that at the beginning they had this depiction, if you touch it, you get like radiation burns. That's what they're pushing during the film at the beginning. And then they had like these goblins coming out and then devouring the whole armies and everything. And these two men are looking at each other. I could go down a big deep decoding. We get they got the yin and the yang. You got the jamborees. You got the two face of two coin looking at each other. I could go down a big rabbit hole with this. Dave, what do you say? What's your breakdown of this slide here? What's your breakdown of this scene of Indiana Jones here?
Well, I think this whole scenario, and if you remember, there was a place where the other archaeologist that competed against him, Malik, and there was a scene in the movie where Malik says to Indiana Jones, I am just a shadowy reflection of you. And here we have this dualistic concept of Luciferianism that, like Eliphas Levi said, that the devil is just God being bad. God is capable of doing good. God is capable of doing bad. Not the true God of the Bible, but this is this Luciferian concept. And all through this, we have the false Messiah. And here we have the Ark, but no, it's not the real Ark. And here we have Indiana Jones, who is a Messiah figure. Well, he's got the Ark, but wrong Ark, wrong Messiah, wrong spirits released out of the Ark. And we see this whole dualistic concept and the idea of these shadowy reflections that just underline the whole movie. And you don't see it unless you decode it. And that's why we have Indiana Jones Decoded tonight on FOJC Radio Sunday Night Live. And some people wonder why I'm always looking over here like this. That's because I got to look over here to see these beautiful slides that Brian's made. That's why. I'm not just fidgeting. I'm not just fidgeting. Sometimes I do fidget, but I'm not just fidgeting. I'm looking at the slides here Brian made. So there you go.
Yeah, when you speak about this, the shadow figures come to mind, all this, the dark and light. I mean, David, it's the full package deal here. I mean, this is a 1981 movie. It's over 40 years old.
Yeah.
And here we are in 2024 depicting it and decoding it. And, it's interesting. I remember too, as a child, in the 80s too, you had the cartoon imagery, same exact thing. They had cartoon, I don't forget one of the names, but they was chasing the Ark of the Covenant. It's almost interesting how this is not only just in cartoon or not in just a real life movie, but we have this angel Ark of the Covenant control with Egyptology and all kinds of different cartoons, etc. And it goes back to the Tom and Jerry days, all those cartoons also. They have the Illuminati, the pyramid, the all-seeing eye. They're chasing these Egyptian hieroglyphics and different artifacts. And one would have to wonder, David, it's almost like inundation. 80s, I think the 80s had such a culture, shock to the public, because if 80s, we had the Star Wars, we had the Indiana Jones, we had the Back to the Future, we had Terminator. It goes on and on. E.T.
Home.
And it goes on and on and on. So it's almost like, he's talking about Forrestal. We had the CIA operatives. We have NASA. It's almost like they set up shop and then started sending rabbit ears. Literally back in the day, you'd had rabbit ear, technology, these old tube TVs, and you're broadcasting spells, casting spells, programming, channeling. And then here we are looking at this tonight. So it's pretty profound.
Yeah. And what came in the 80s in these absolute iconic blockbuster movies that have been such a part of all of our lives, almost all. And then in the 90s and then into the 2000s, it's just gotten more and more blatant and more out in the open. And now, it's a runaway train. It's a runaway train. And all of the things that for years have been talked about in predictive programming, we're seeing become a reality at a very, very breakneck speed. And I was going to say frightening. And if you don't know Jesus Christ, it is frightening. And that's why we want to extend the hope of the gospel to anyone out there listening tonight. If you do not know Jesus Christ as your Savior in full pardon and forgiveness of sins, you can repent and believe the gospel and place your faith in the death of Christ upon the cross as payment for your sin debt. Jesus is there waiting for you. He is the real Messiah that is waiting for you. And you can come to him right now, and you don't have to sleep another night without knowing Jesus. All righty. Zechariah 14:12, and Brian is going to show some slides. We got to be careful here because our friends at YouTube don't like to show distorted faces. So John's going to show some slides here. We all remember that scene there at the end where the Nazis were there and the flesh melted off their face. We remember that, don't we? Very dramatic depiction of just literally the flesh melting. Maybe it was something like this. Zechariah 14:12, and this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. And this was very graphically depicted. And the only problem being is that everything is reversed here in this scenario. It's like they believe that that's going to fall on the people that are opposing them. But here in the end, anyway, the Nazis, the bad guys lose. And it's just really something that these characters here, they mailed away just in an exact way. The Bible says that the judgment is going to fall on the nations that in the end are going to make that final run on Jerusalem. Now, it's also interesting that in Revelation chapter 19, verse 11, there's dumb and there's dumber, but there's people that really believe in Jesus Christ, and they really believe that Satan is a superior power, and they really believe they can defeat Jesus. And they really, when Jesus returns, they believe in the second coming of Christ. They're not rapture believers. They believe, and when he returns, they're actually going to try to shoot him with a gun. Could you imagine when Jesus shows up and trying to shoot him? It's not what you want to do. But let's read it in Scripture. Revelation chapter 19 and verse 19. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. When Jesus returns with the spirits of those to be reunited with their body in the great resurrection day, literally, they're going to try to fight them. And then what we read in Zechariah 14:12, it's going to be a no contest. Literally, they're going to melt, just like in this scene in Indiana Jones and as it's been depicted in other of these sci-fi movies. And there we go.
Yeah, I'm gonna show the one of the main villains here. I had to, like Brother David spoke of, we had to watch what we show here. But just a few seconds after this frame here, he's screaming because there is, let's just say it looks like something off of the movie Ghostbusters. There's another 80s reference movie. But this gentleman here, his face literally melts. Well, it's interesting that one of the main villains, and they're all sitting here, there's three of them, and they're standing in front of the Ark of the Covenant. And when they do this, it's almost like they're participating in a ritual. And then all of a sudden you see fog and you see these spirits, these ghosts, these goblins start to come, literally manifest in front of all these Germans. And I want to get your take, David, interrupt at any time. But as we can see here, they're starting to manifest out of the Ark of the Covenant. And when they do that, they're spiraling everywhere. And Indiana Jones, and I never forgot the woman that I think it's his girlfriend on there. She's tied up, and he says, "Don't look, because he said, "Don't open your eyes." And all these men are literally captivated they're marveling after these powers, so to speak. And then the main villain's like, "Look how beautiful it is. Look at the beauty. Look at the beauty." And all of a sudden, they see the beauty, all right. And you see these ghosts that are literally or spirits driving through the flesh and just cutting them wide open, so to speak. And I want to point something out. Here they are in a cave system, David. I want your take. They're in a cave system. We have this German connection. We have military application. We have this Ark of the Covenant technology. We have these spirits. David, I want to bring this up. This is something very interesting. I remember very well whenever we had World War II, and then you had the Hitler and the Germans and all that, and they had the Nazi. We have the whole concept with NASA and everything we've talked about tonight. But I want to bring this up. I've read a lot of documents that talk about military applications, and every one that I've looked at, especially around my local area, there would be some type of paranormal activity, that was dated back in the 1700s, so to speak. And lo and behold, there would be villages. They would deem them as prehistoric villages. And when they would do that, they would look at the data. Well, I seen a correlation whenever this happened with Germany and whatnot. And each location I've looked at, there's like this poltergeist, there's like this whatever it is, stargates, UFO phenomenon, whatever the narrative is. But that's where they strategically lay military bases. And I think what this is depicting here in Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, they're doing a ritual. They're doing something here to access the powers of the Ark of the Covenant. But my point is, it's underground. So what is it? We have all these spiritual applications. We have the sacrifice. We have Indiana Jones and his girlfriend tied to this pole, and he's like, "Don't look, don't look." So I think this is like a real life account because I've looked at the data. Not nothing to do with this Ark of the Covenant, but I'm saying like there's spiritual applications with rituals, and then we have these military bases strategically laid upon because there's this paranormal so-called UFO, whatever you want to call it. This is where these are strategically placed. What do you say, David? And I think that's what they're depicting here in Indiana Jones. They're showing you what they're doing, but they're making it as a comedy, then a slash actions, a romantic, and they're playing on your emotions like we talked about predictive programming. What do you say about that, David, with the Army military applications and as far as real life? Because we have CERN, we have these hadron colliders, and I think it all ties together with what they found on an electrical magnetic field frequency like you do at Skinwalker Ranch, and they're placing these places strategically. What do you say, Brother David?
Well, there's an association of location in the movie. We have the big obelisk there in the model of the Egyptian city. Then at the end of the movie, you have the big obelisk there in Washington, D.C. And there are a known fact, massive underground facilities there in Washington, D.C. Huge, huge underground facilities. And I think this is what we got going on there. It's like they're showing us a parallel location here. And the idea, and you see the whole thing of the release of the spirits from the ark, they're not the good spirits. This is the release that we speak about from Revelation chapter 9. And the idea of not being able to look upon a fallen spirit, it goes back to we saw, you mentioned the symbolism that was so similar between the snake and the serpent, that we would talk about the feathered serpent of Quetzalcoatl, and also the basilisk, which was half chicken and half snake. Well, according to the stories of the basilisk, if you would look at the basilisk, you'd die just from looking at it. And this is exactly what we see. These are like basilisks. These are like the spirits of the feathered serpent that come out. Well, don't you look at them? And also, we remember in the story of Medusa, that the lady that had the snakes for the hair, well, you look at her, you turn to stone. And the idea is very much prevalent that there are certain spirits in the underworld that if you even look at them, you're dead. And that's what we see depicted here. Don't open your eyes, Marion. Don't look. Don't look. Because literally, these were spirits so toxic, like the basilisk, that you just look at them, you're gone.
And like I mentioned earlier, it reminds me of literally a Ghostbuster plasma, radiation fields,
Yeah.
and it's literally, it cuts right through them. You see the flame, you can see like it looks like lava when it cuts right through the army that's standing there. They see the spirit go through, and they just turn in. They're like imploding, and
Yes.
they're melting. So it's almost like, that's a huge topic right now. But nuclear activity, you implode, and there's there's a correlation here somewhere. We're pulling all the pieces in. We can only speculate on. We're just relating to a movie, but when it comes to real life applications, I wonder what type of technology, David, that they really do have, and if they're able to,
Yeah.
really capture and replicate technology, and even if they have the Ark of the Covenant locked down, I wonder what tests they have done to really and spread that abroad, is what I'm saying, and using these obelisks and these ancient technology. And I think it goes back to what we just referred to earlier: Tesla, NASA, all of it. And I think they're sitting on a powder keg of archaeology information, and that's what this movie's depicting. And they're saying, Hitler, Germany, they got to access all this data. They right out of the gate of this movie, they're saying, oh yeah, we got to get all this done. Indiana Jones, we need you. We need to hire you to be able to be the savior, to be able to get all this information. We got to find the Ark of the Covenant before Hitler does. I mean, come on, David. It's in your face.
And we're back to the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm.
In Revelation chapter 11, verse 6, and the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. And what we see, the things that we thought was just the imagination of science fiction writers, we're seeing happen. We're seeing this crazy technology come alive at breakneck speed, and literally everything that is imagined in science fiction movies has been brought into a reality, and it goes on and on and on. So I absolutely, Brian, I think that what we know they can do is just a fraction of what they can actually do.
Absolutely. They wouldn't have used all this propaganda and gaslighting the public through these individuals that we've mentioned today. They would not have been using these individuals to move let's just say, the flock of people back in the 60s,
Yeah.
50s, 70s, all the above.
All right. Okay, here we go. Let's look at that slide. Let's bring that up. And we see here the slide of Mary and the Ark of the Covenant. And Mary is sitting there, and this speaks of defilement. And the place where the Ark of the Covenant sits is a very holy place. And here we see a woman sitting upon it and defiling it. And we also see the horns that are coming up. And I'm just going to wait a minute. We got a little delay
Well,
to where I can look at the slide and speak to it here, Brian.
I'll tell you this: I get the Semiramis.
There it is.
I get the Semiramis feel too. But continue on there, O'Day. I don't want to take the floor from you. Go ahead, my friend.
All right, there it is. It popped up. We got a little delay here, and it definitely in Roman Catholic theologians they speak of Mary as the ark. They absolutely speak of the BVM as the ark, and this is actually a picture from a church where we see Mary sitting upon the ark with the cherubims around it. There she is in the most holy place, enthroned as the goddess, and underneath we see the horns. She's sitting upon the horns. And this goes back to Genesis where it talks about the Ashtoreth of the two horns. And this goes back to the actual, the association between Isaiah 14:12, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, Hallel ben Shahar. And literally, this relates to Venus as it moves, and as it moves from being a morning star to an evening star, it literally draws horns. This is what this is from, Luciferian worship. And this is why we have the horns on the Viking, the Ashtoreth of the two horns. And this is why in so many of these pictures you see the BVM of Catholicism with the horns associated with Mary. And this is blasphemous. This is depicting the Queen of Heaven, and there is no Queen of Heaven. And of course, we know that this is idolatrous and it's wrong. And, we just pray that as we show these things, that our Catholic friends will just see now, there's something wrong here. There's just something wrong here. You don't have to be the sharpest knife in the drawer to figure out that something real wrong with this scenario. And indeed there is. It's spiritually wrong. And this goes in to this entire concept that we've been unpacking tonight of the false ark and the whole thing, which is this underlying scenario of Indiana Jones, the whole Nazi Internationale, and the blasphemous release of spirits at the end of time. We got it all right there in Indiana Jones Decoded. Now, what I want to do now,
go ahead,
and
Dave.
I'm going to give you time here for final comments here, but what I want to do over in the Midnight Ride, we do a little Pounders Pound. Now, over here on FOJC Radio, we're going to do the Sunday Night Slam. Now, we're going to count to 3, and I want as many of you that enjoyed the broadcast tonight, and you liked it, you did, and as many of you as did, on the count of 3, I want you to hit that like button and to send our algorithms through the roof to help us as much as we can in getting the message out. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, slam. There we go. I'm feeling it. Watch them roll. There we go. And we're going to shoot those likes up. And thank you all so very much. And we really appreciate each and every one of you that joined us for the broadcast tonight, wherever you are across, as the Egyptians say, this good old flat earth. And thank you so much for being a part of this broadcast. Brian, always for all that you do. I enjoyed this broadcast tonight. It was informative. It was fun. And I think it's going to, this series, we're going to be doing some more of these. On Sunday night, we're going to be doing a little mystery conspiracy theater, a little Cities Lost in Time, and who knows what else. So, Brian, what are your final thoughts on the broadcast tonight?
Well, like always, I'm honored to be co-host here with you, and it's a blessing, David. But let's do one more little decode. It just came to my mind looking at this Mary and the two angels, and you have 2 candles. Let's look at this slide one more time, and let's really just ponder on the idea here. Just hear me out. Speaking of a conspiracy, let's see what we can unravel here. So we have Mary that's sitting on the horn here. We have the 2 angels. If you go back to that slide with the villain, and he is summoning the spirits out of the ark, and once again, We have a black imagery on the right side with the man. It looked like Men in Black, obviously, with his outfit, his attire. And then we have the white. So we have, the yin and the yang. But I wanted to point something out. He's summoning all these goblins and, these ghosts, these spirits, but left and right. And if you go to the Mary one, there's two candles on left and right of the angels, and we have this cross in the middle. Wow. And it's almost like when he goes, "It's beautiful, it's beautiful." Is he? This is kind of some added feature bonus content here with no extra charge, like Brother David would say. Wonder if he's relating to this, what we're talking about here. She's beautiful, it's beautiful. And then here comes, if you remember, the one that the spirit that comes up to the man that his face melts, it's a depiction of a woman, David. I'm not. Yeah. Remember, the ghost comes up to it and it shows the feet. It shows the picture of a lady.
Yes, it does.
Is it relating? Is it relating to Mary in some shape or wicked form? I don't know, but I wanted to know your take on that before we sign off on here tonight. That's something to ponder on Indiana Jones Decoded. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it is definitely the connection of the goddess figure. There's no doubt about it, and it's spoken of as a great wonder in Revelation 17:6 when it's talking about. Says, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. The sight of it was so stunning that it even set back the Apostle John. I think that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Absolutely, David. And that's the way we're going to end it tonight, man.
Yeah,
Indiana Jones Decoded, and it's such a blessing to do it. Such a blessing to do it, David. And
there you go.
Thank you all, everybody, for attending with us tonight. And you did the slam. We felt the seismic activity, 5.0 over here. We felt it over here in the eastern side of the Americas here. So. David, it's always a blessing doing this, and I'm thankful to do this Mystery Conspiracy Theater. The first episode here of Indiana Jones Decoded, what a blessing it is, Brother David, and thank you for letting me be the co-host, brother, and I'll give the floor out to you and let you end this out. But yeah, keep your eyes on Christ, and let's walk that narrow way. And that's
and let us know what you think of Mystery Conspiracy Theater. And we just, again, with all thanks to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and to all of you, we could not do what we do at FOJC Radio without your prayers and support. So with that, a big high five and a good night, everybody, from FOJC Radio Sunday Night Live. We will see you again very soon. God bless you all.